So my first question is, do you agree with my description of the problems? Do you see some other problems? Or maybe something that I said is actually not a problem in your opinion? And I think I will just give the floor to whoever wants to begin. We have 3 microphones, so we'll have to share them.
Okay. So actually I suspect that what you mentioned was made for us to disagree, because you offered a very one-sided view about internet as an apocalypse. And I think each time a new technology emerges, you get the same reaction, which is opposite reaction. Some people dream about it, and some people hate it, and some people see what's best in it, and some people see what's worse in it. But I think both are wrong, because when you say, for instance, internet broke journalism, I'm a journalist, so maybe I should agree with you and say, yes, you're right, it's really a shame, internet broke journalism. But I really disagree, because the technology is neutral, and what's important is the use of technology. And it's us, it's not the technology. If you say internet broke journalism, maybe it's the responsibility of journalists to do something about it and to reinvent themselves and to embrace the technology. So that's basically the first point I wanted to bring, is about the nature of the technology and the importance of how you use it.
Thank you. I would like to direct this to Daniel for a second about technology being neutral, and maybe if you want to comment on that, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's a good one. Actually, I disagree immediately. Because no technology is neutral. I don't believe in it. I have had some times in my life when I have actually thought about it, that it may be neutral, but any technology makes changes in your life. And how can it be neutral? And same with the internet. It's not neutral, but I'm also, I think that demonizing it is not a right way to proceed. I think the key word here is reinventing things. But also, I was recently at some event when there was this quite well-known journalistic figure from Estonia, and he was talking the same story that I had heard about for about 15 years. This is, listen guys, we have this pressure from the owners, we have pressure from this click revenue, and we just, yeah, we do what we can. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, I'm totally tired of this bullshit. Because this is, if this is the story of reinvention, this is not a story of reinvention. This is just a story of some companies surviving the internet. But I think that reinvention at some point is possible, but not from this standpoint. But we just have to somehow manage. We make 10 articles, one of them is like some kind of long form story, and the rest, like 9 of them, are just controversial things that are actually meant to infuriate some people and to gather more some kind of clicks. So I agree that reinvention is needed, but definitely not for this kind of from this neutral viewpoint.
Just to know, does everyone hear what we are talking here? Everything is okay with that? Okay, thank you. Then maybe Caroline first. Caroline, you've written a whole book about the negative effects of information. What do you think? Do you agree? Or?
I agree with Laurent because I think technology is neutral. Because when electricity came, everybody thinks they cannot read all the books because we have time to read. And we were in Infobésité at this time. So I think with the new technologies, it's the same way. We must adapt to this new technology, and we must adapt in our manner of managing it. Everybody can produce information. Everybody has an opinion of everything. And I think it's comportamental. We need to control ourselves. We need to think before acting on the réseau. And It's a responsibility of the citizen in democracy to think before acting. I think it's very important to mention this. The technology is not responsible for everything. We have our part of responsibility when we publish something, when we share something. I think we have a responsibility.
Okay, thank you. And Adeline?
Well, I'd like to answer to this first question of neutrality, because I've been studying a very long time the newspaper in 19th century France, and it's true that we can read the same reaction about the growth of newspapers in 19th century, and people were really very afraid of what was happening with this press and mass media, the first maybe mass medias. And some writers like Émile Zola, they thought that it was the end of intelligence, and everybody was becoming very silly because the newspapers were telling very small things about very small people. So, but I think that today this new technology, it's the same and it's different too, because it's exactly the question of internet neutrality, I think, because the technology in itself has to be managed. I mean, everybody has to adapt to it, to invent journalism too. But the situation today is different from 19th century press, because some very, very big companies and international, mondialized companies are taking power above technology. So it's what I think we call internet neutrality. So the technology, yes, you can do anything with it, but the question is the business model, which is growing now and which gives too much power to some very few companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still like to ask if we agree that new technology creates new opportunities. If it creates new power relations, how can it be neutral?
Opportunities.
It changes the world as it is, and probably these changes also drive people in different directions than their lives were before. So I mean, for me, the idea of neutrality is that you can basically do whatever you want, but in case of technology, you quite often feel that new technology takes you to a new direction.
I think maybe we have a problem with the word neutral, because maybe it's not the right word here. Saying that is not, I mean, I don't mean that it doesn't change anything. I think that what's more important is the way you use it. And for instance, what you said about Facebook and Google now being the main gateways towards news, towards consuming the news, is really how people use the internet, because they choose to use Facebook, they choose to use Google as gateways for the news. And we have to assess the outcome of this evolution. But this evolution is not a technological evolution. It's really about how people use the internet.
Are you sure? Because in my mind, what has happened is that the internet enables a lot of weak ties. These are like ties that you can engage. With these ties, you can engage people from all over the world. But these weak ties are exactly the ties that enable Facebook's business model. So maybe Facebook's business model is not someone's choice, but this is built inside the
Anyway, it's not the choice of the person who invented the web. Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the web, is appalled about what it has become and how companies use the web, how people use the web, and now he has projects about creating something a little separate from what he made. So
I think the question here that is important in the context of debate is like if technology, let's say social media, to be more specific here. If social media is neutral, then what we would have today is just more of the same that we used to have before. Like in a faster way and a more massive way. And if it is not neutral, then it has also changed something qualitatively.
Doesn't change our lives, but it's just deciding that this technology is good and this is bad. Each technology can be good or bad, I think. But the question is that there is a business model with social media today, which is always the same. There is only one, and it's killing other business models, like newspapers. But newspapers are not killed by internet. I don't think so. They are killed by what happened with their business model with internet. And internet developed at the same time as several crises with advertising and with financial. So it's not only internet, but some very powerful companies are taking all the money of it. But I don't think the technology in itself, because in the public debate today, even on social medias, you can find everything. I think you can find the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. But maybe some kinds of debates which are violent and they take more space, but if you search in a long time, you can also find some very skilled and intelligent debates, I think.
But I think with the social media, it goes quicker. So it's a real problem. An information earns another. So it's going faster and faster and faster. And it's difficult for people to think, to keep their capacity to think, to analyze. And I think it's a big problem today in manipulation the information. So I think it's a big problem now.
I don't agree. You want to let me disagree, so I disagree. Because it's a question of going quicker. Because I'm actually spending a lot of time in 1839, so in 19th century. Mm-hmm. And everybody was complaining about this question of going quicker. So I think the question of comment dit vitesse? Speed. The question of speed is also a question of sensibility, of perception. So we have this perception today, and people living at the middle of 19th century had the same perception. So it's again a question of managing the technology. It's just that, okay, it's going very quick, it's true, but it's also that what you see first takes the time of what you see after. I mean, what you see first, yes. I mean, what comes first when you're doing a research takes all the place, and you won't see what comes after that, you see?
Yes.
And
okay.
you can't have all the things together, because the first coming is taking the place of the other. You see what I mean? It's a question with social media. When my PhD students, when they are studying social medias like YouTube or Instagram, they have really a lot of problems when they want to study a large period of time, even 1 year or even 10 years, because everything is made not to give you the possibility of going forward, going backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with you, but I think it's the problem not to have history. I think it's a big problem today, because we are always in the present and in the future, but an information makes sense for you with the past and with the history. And I think it's a big problem now, because one information ends another. So how can we think and analyze an event or a fact, an information, without the history? I think it's a big problem today, and I am a professor too, and we have a big debate about this. Shall the students learn Parker, by heart, thank you, lessons, and every student now say no, of course, we shall not. So I think it's a big problem, because when you want to understand something, to analyze a fact, a story, you need the past, and you need memory, and if you don't have this, you cannot understand the world. And I think it's a very problem now.
I'm still just mentioning this neutrality issue, but I will just take it further. I mean, it's probably a matter of how much of a technological determinist one is. I am a lot of into this technological determinism. I believe that technology has its own power paths that actually drive people to different directions. I like what Adorno once said about automatic locks, that you just, the moment these appeared, people never looked back and they closed the doors. And I also think that in architecture, for example, you could say it's neutral, but there is someone who is an architect. And in today's urban planning, you know that there is a lot of nudging, of doing stuff around it. And also this metaphor of someone holding a master switch. Every now and then a new technology comes. It is probably very democratic in the beginning, and it seems that it may even be very neutral. Like when radio came, people actually were invited into radio stations. Just look what's happening, and they sometimes interrupted their shows, but quite soon it became quite clear that it's not possible to have radio shows like that. And then so, coming back to the internet, I think this weak ties, strong ties thing is quite illuminating, because people used to have more strong ties before. It meant that you had more ties with your neighbors and with your family, and then this kind of institutionalized things. The same thing happened in the 19th century when you had the news, and then this created generations and all that stuff. But now this weak ties thing, if you just take an experiment mathematically and try to find a solution to a problem with weak ties, then you see that you reach less optimal level of problem solving than with strong ties. For example, you have a problem that we here in Estonia had one factory that was about to be built, and people had this kind of weak ties mentality around it. A lot of this kind of scares and very simple fears were around it. And weak ties normally introduce this not in my backyard issues, because it produces this kind of local maximums. And if you don't have strong ties, you don't have time to discuss the global maximum for solution. And it is built in internet. It's how Tim Berners-Lee, before Tim Berners-Lee, how DARPA made it happen. It was meant to be like that. It was never meant to be some place there is someone who has really strong ties. It was meant to go in the different packages from different routes to survive a nuclear war and things like that. And in this situation, I think that it drives us towards weak ties, and it will never happen with existing I don't know, publishing houses and existing media, that we will return to strong ties like that. I think at the same time, to reinvent the situation, we need to find how we can build strong ties, but not with this. It has to evolve to something. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, I think what's a stronger problem is what you mentioned, which is the business models, because there is, I mean, lots of people blame Facebook for what's going on because of fake news, because of the filter bubble, the echo chamber, and I mean, these kind of notions. But basically, when we do that, we tend to forget that Facebook is a company and that its aim is really to make money. And how does Facebook make money? Their aim is to glue you to your device. The more you spend time on the device, the more Facebook generates revenues. And that's just how it works.
But
So
how does that harm public debate, in your opinion?
it harms public debate because in order to achieve this, to make you stay the longest possible on Facebook, Facebook gives you what you click on. If you like, if you stay longer, then Facebook is going to give it to you. And that's not a precondition for public debate, and that's really the opposite. For instance, how did fake news develop? Fake news developed for maybe essentially two reasons. The first reason is that companies, news outlets, which are not news outlets, but some companies discovered that it was much easier to produce fake stories than real stories, because it takes much less time. You don't have to report, you don't have to search information, you just have to invent and to write. And that's how content farms were created, and they flooded Facebook with fake news. Then the second reason is political, ideological. It's because some people found out that Facebook accommodated these kind of stories very easily, and that you could influence the public debate very easily through Facebook. So that's really because of the business model. Facebook allowed it because it served its economic and financial interests. That's the end of the question.
Hmm? Well, I would like to kind of get to the end of the mapping of the problems side, but if someone has any other problem that have been mentioned yet, then please do that.
Yes, I want to say that I think a big problem with social media is contradiction. Finally, there's no contradiction, because we know we are always going to see people who think the same way like you. So there's no real contradiction on the social media. We always see people who think like me or like us, and it's a real problem for democracy, I think so.
I'm still surprised that you think it's a business model issue. I think it's a technological issue.
What do you mean?
For example, if you go and look at the different startups when they start, they quite often have this idea that, okay, let's make things different. But then the reality of internet connections makes them just move towards the same business model every time. So it's not who is on the top. It's not that Facebook just evolved kind of evil. It is that the environment, this technological new infrastructure, just made it really simple to evolve into this direction. It's not that there is a choice of Mark Zuckerberg. It is this interaction with this kind of weak ties world. Then it is just the simplest way. So unless you just want to shut the business at all, I think you will always have the next Facebook in a similar environment. That's what I believe, at least.
In some ways, it goes to the debate of free will and agency versus kind of structuralism. Like, why do things happen in the society at all? Like, do we have a choice? Do we do what the society kind of structure has to do or not? So basically, Daniel is saying that we don't, that it doesn't matter what you want to do, your business will be like formed according to internet.
Or regulation. You can maybe, like it's all, sorry I'm talking maybe too much in a row, but it's normally also happened that at some point the regulators look at this, and I like how EU is looking at these things, that they say no way these things are self-regulating. Mm-hmm. They will not. And this has happened with radio, TV, cinema, everything in the past. Okay,
we'll take one answer to this as well, and then we'll continue if someone wants to answer that right now.
So I think, as far as technology is concerned, the problem is algorithm with Facebook. But the algorithm serves the purpose of the business model. And the Facebook algorithm, as Caroline said, the problem with the Facebook algorithm is that it pushes you towards what you already like, what you already know, what you already agree with, because the more you receive this kind of news, the more you are going to stay, the more you are going to click. And that's really the opposite of what a media is for. The purpose of a media is the opposite. The purpose of the media is to widen your horizon. The purpose of the media is to help you think against yourself, is to expose you to different kind of opinions, not only the opinions that you already know and that you already share. And that's the fact that Facebook is now the gateway, one of the main gateways for news, totally changed how people get the news, how people think, how people deal with politics. So it's really a massive change. But it's really how a technology meets an economic model.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's clear you are right when you say it's not business, it's technology. But which is the technology we are talking about? Because is social media in itself a technology, or are we talking about internet? Because on internet, you can also find the exact contrary of social media. You can find, for instance, the museums. You can find everything you find in a museum. You can see it on internet and for free. And you can read many newspapers. So many opinions different from your opinion. So you can find a lot of things in this technology, but social media is something quite special. And if I come to your question, is it good? What is the problem with the public debate? I think that the problem is that social media looks like public debate, but it's private interest. It's only companies' interest at the end. And you have the feeling that Facebook is like a huge country, but no, it's just one company. And it's the same with Twitter and with Instagram. And
in one word, you are not a citizen anymore, you are just a user.
yes.
How many of you are
Customer.
members of social networking site called Ello?
I think I used to have an account, but
Yeah,
I didn't use
that's
it.
like a great alternative to Facebook with different business model. It never took off.
I mean, this is a question that we can discuss for
This
length.
is not technology. It's
why
business.
we are in this situation, but in the end it doesn't matter. Like, we are in this situation, we agree on that, and the next step from here is to kind of ask the question of how do we get out of this. Like the problems that you mentioned, some of the things maybe not so bad as you said, but some are. So let's get there. Like first, in the first round, I would like to you all think about what do you think is the most important thing, like the one thing that we should be doing, and you can choose if it's like a state regulation or some other thing, but like the most important thing that we should do in order to fix public debate in this situation.
Yeah, we can think of many solutions, but if you ask me the most efficient one, I would say education. Awareness of the problem, awareness about how it works, awareness about what the algorithms are about, how they work, awareness about the business model of these companies, and awareness of the risks. And that's really the role of education, and I think the earlier it starts, the most efficient it is.
I will be a little bit critical here in this round. So I will be asking a few questions also if you propose the solution and then see what happens. I don't think most people already know that Facebook sells their data. Most people already know that their data is basically a product to sell advertising. Most people know about the negative effects of social media already. And yet, if we compare it like today, Mark Zuckerberg introduced the last quarter's results for Facebook. It has still grown. It has grown like a couple of million people extra are now using Facebook. So they are aware, but nothing has changed. Why do you think education changes?
Because they accept it.
But how does education change it?
Because do they understand the implication of what it means really? I mean, data, it's something very abstract for people. I'm not sure the awareness is really what you think it is. I mean, I think it's much lower in the I mean, generally speaking, of course.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
I agree with you. I'm not sure. I would like to believe that education will, because I have 2 children, well, quite grown now, and since several years, I think that they understand much better than me, how it works and what is going with that data. But I think the question is the public and the democratic meaning of that. And I think that the best solution for me it's taxes and regulation by the law. In France, we have a very, very good law voted in 1881, but the law works for French companies and French medias. And it's really difficult, I think, to apply it to international global medias like Facebook. I think it's really not easy. So I'm quite optimistic because I have the feeling that it's going to change now. Because the taxes is also a way of making companies realize that they contribute to economy and they get incomes by the economy, they have to pay taxes for that, and they are a part of community, I don't know, citizenship in a way.
Okay, I would like to ask about regulation. Like, I think it's a huge topic and we probably should discuss it. What kind of regulation do you have in mind? What would you like to be regulated about social media, for example? If you want to comment.
I would like to say that we need people to defend in general interest. Because on internet, on social media, it's always private interest, like Laurent said. So I think we need governments, we need institutions to defend the general interest and the democracy. Defend the general interest is defend the truth in information. Defend the fact that we need media, independent media, and I think it's very important to make this. And I think also it's important. Education is the key for me because we need to separate and to distinguish information and communication. And we are in the area of communication now. So we need to know what is an information, a fact, which is checked, verified by someone like a job, you know. And now we are in communication, and it's very different. Communication is a speech produced to sell an idea, to sell a party, to sell a personality, and to sell private and to defend private interest. So I think we need people to defend general interest.
Okay. Any other solutions here?
I'm also thinking that the only accessible idea for me is regulation, which I already mentioned. And I think if you look at history, when it has been done like this, that we take Google and we separate its businesses. We separate the Android, we separate the whatever search, and we make them different companies by force. And it is, of course, something that US has to do. Sometimes EU can force these things happen in EU. Also, we take Facebook, we just make different applications into different companies. Like, I don't know, Messenger is one company, and sell WhatsApp, and then do all these things, break it down. So it doesn't have this kind of cross-platform power that will be unbeatable by any other competitor at some point. The power is just too big. So I think this is something that has worked in similar situations. Maybe it may work here. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know.
I have 2 questions about that, having prepared for this proposal. First of all, if the internet is the way you say it is, then these separated companies, they will compete with each other and one of them will win. using the same underlying structure of the web, becoming the sole, like the monopoly again, as Facebook has become. That's question number one. How do you prevent that from happening if you split them up? But even more practical question, I think, is China. That Facebook says, if you say something like this to Facebook, and it has been said, that yeah, you might break us up, but then you'll have the Chinese companies conquering the world with their social media, and you'll have a monopoly that you cannot control. So you'd better have a Facebook controlling the planet that you can actually control with your laws, than have like tiny Facebooks that lose to Chinese companies.
Yeah, I was thinking that this might come up. But I don't have a good solution. But I still believe that, it is possible to curb the power. And also, I think if I actually could be a user of WhatsApp, which is a powerful platform already, and this is like forcefully separated from Facebook, there is a choice. I don't think I will want to migrate back to Facebook. The reason why Facebook has so much power is that it has actually made a lot of acquisitions. And sometimes this should have actually been prevented. And China can do things in China, but when they spread, in different markets, they still have to follow these regulations. That's what I can say. Again, this may be naive, but this is something that looks at least possible.
Okay. Anyone want to react to that?
Yeah, I think if you split Facebook and WhatsApp, Facebook will always be Facebook. So I don't really see how it's going to change.
But if you break up Facebook into two companies,
which line? How can you break up Facebook?
That is a very good question. How do you break up Facebook?
It's basically a collection of applications. So you can say that you have to stay away from this business. For example, Microsoft was forced to from pre-installing Microsoft browser once. It's a similar issue. There's nothing really different on that. So you can just make them not be in some businesses.
Okay. Any other solutions?
Actually, I wanted to mention, I don't know if it's a good solution, but I wanted to mention a new law that came up in France to prevent fake news during election times, election campaigns. And actually, just to tell you what it is about, so the new law states that incorrect or misleading facts able to alter the outcome of an election should be forbidden. And so any politician campaigner will be able to go to a judge, and the judge will decide if the piece of information that is brought up is deliberately misleading. So actually, I see two problems with this new law. The first one is that it's going to be very difficult for a judge to assess what is deliberately misleading and what is not. There was an ongoing debate surrounding this project about the freedom of expression, if it's going to be to limit the freedom of expression. And also maybe another problem, we are going to see what happens, but is that it's going to give publicity to fake news instead of curbing them.
I think that every solution needs to be scalable, as the technology that we are talking about is extremely scalable. Google doesn't do anything based upon manpower, and just making it automatic as much as possible. So also the prevention and all these kind of things has to be some kind of scalable solution, which is charges are not probably.
Actually, I'd like to comment on that myself, because I've been looking at China and how China works. And there was this prediction that when internet gets into China, that the communist regime will fall. And obviously it hasn't happened. The regime actually has gotten stronger. And they have very, very active internet. They have invented some things on the internet already that are very popular among young people, even in the Western world. And one of those things is live streaming, where a person sits in front of a camera and talks about random stuff. They're mostly young, pretty girls, but not only. And it's very popular in China. And one of these young girls sang the Chinese national anthem a bit wrong. So it was a bit funny in that sense, but it was heard by the censors. And so she was contacted, and she would apologized on her live feed. So Chinese have found a way to employ enough people to monitor 1.3 billion people on the internet doing weird stuff on the internet. So it's basically possible.
It's AI-based, definitely.
Yes,
a
probably.
lot of
Also.
algorithms involved there.
Yeah, probably. Also. You want to comment?
So what you say is interesting. It reminds me of something I've been reading today about Estonian use of internet and the state, l'état numérique, I don't know how to say, the digital state. And I was really surprised when I discovered that it works here, and it would never work in France, I think. In France, everybody would be scared about what people would be doing with their data. I mean that what works here is that you are confident in the public use of data. That's what I understood today. And so, and you show, talking about China, that it's possible to take a very strong control but on technology. So I don't understand why we couldn't make it possible to apply the laws in every country. We have in France this law of freedom, of free expression, 1881 again, and these laws tells that there are a lot of things that you shouldn't be able to do and that you do on internet. I mean, having hate speeches, telling lies. Telling lies is forbidden with this law. Defamating, does it exist? Yes. And and insult public people and all things everybody can see every day, every minute on social media.
But does it work in France?
No, it doesn't work. That's why I don't understand. And when I saw the question of this new law Laurent was talking about, I thought, like many people, I think, that this law was already in a way preventing that. It's just that it was not especially for elections, but it was already forbidden. So we have to find ways of applying our laws against companies. And it's possible, since countries like China do it so strongly. It's not a dream, of course.
Well, some people probably will not like it if we do it like China does. But still,
the problem is where you put the lines, because I mean, originally this law applied mainly to the written press, and so then the question is how could it apply to the internet? But for instance, what you mentioned about insulting other people, you won't prevent people from insulting each other in the street, for instance.
But it's not in the street.
Yeah,
it's
not
public.
in the street. It's public, but
yes, it's public.
The line is very fine. I mean,
I think it's another very big problem. It's the difference between private and public. And when it's published, it's public. I mean, when you on Facebook, it should be public because it's published. Other people can see it.
Also on Facebook you have secret groups where there is no way for at least the authorities to, without interfering with the rules of the platform, to know what people are saying. So for example, you have Facebook groups where people, thousands of people, millions of people in the world are discussing things that are not public, saying things like we should murder someone or burn someone's house.
Yes.
No one knows.
It's true, but you have a lot of things which are public, but that you don't see. I mean, when you search, you find it, but it's just that if you don't search it, you don't find it. It's true that some things are not public, not exactly public, but there are a lot of things that you can find, actually. It's just that there are too much published. And that's the question.
A lot of both. But any more solutions? And actually, the audience, if you're thinking along and thinking about some solution, then like just minute and a half, I will be asking you for your solutions as well. So you'll be ready for that.
Just if you allow me, because I didn't make my point very well about education.
Okay.
My point was not to tell people you should give up Facebook. That was not what I intended to say. But my point was you should know what it's about. And for instance, you should know that you cannot say, I read it on Facebook. Because now when you hear people say that, you hear people say, I saw it on the internet, I saw it on Facebook. And it's not something you should say, because if you read it on Facebook, there is a source behind what you read. And you should question the source. That's this kind of things I was thinking about.
In Estonia, about like 65% of media is generated on what's happening in internet.
Yeah.
It's like where someone said something on internet, that's like a news story.
So, the audience, you have been listening and thinking, I hope. Anyone has any ideas how we can solve these problems with the public debate in the age of internet? Just raise your hand, and I don't think we necessarily need the microphone if you're ready to be loud. Yes, please.
I'll just get up for a second. Thank you very much for the debate. I suppose my question was not really a solution in that way.
And it's not a solution.
I suppose it will put some minds at ease, perhaps.
Okay.
How about we just accept it? In my opinion, as far as I can tell, social media and other forms of internet communication just make things visible that have always happened, and they just make us more aware that they are now happening semi-publicly, whatever you want to call it. So how about we just say these sorts of things have always been thought by some parts of the population. That's the way a democracy should work.
Thank you. That's one possible solution. If you want to comment, you can.
Yeah, my comment would be that it's again very philosophical, which side you pick. If you say something out, does it change you? If you say out that I hate someone, does it change you? Does it make you more hateful? And I believe it does. That happens. And even if people have sometimes had some ideas, when you start saying it out, it changes you. You will become a different person. That's what I believe. But at the same time, I like the proposal to accept it, because we need to accept it. It's such a reality. We just, whatever we build on it, we need to accept that it exists. That is a good proposal in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that when we take if we take a historical perspective, I think you are right, because what you said was very interesting, that in the 19th century, when people looked at newspapers, they thought it would kill the debate. And now newspapers appear as the main vehicle for one of the main vehicles for the debate, and it's considered a slow media, whereas in the 19th century it was the instant media. And so I think you have a very positive approach, and I agree that things are going to adjust by themselves. What we saw, for instance, during the recent elections, or in the United States, or the Brexit referendum in the UK, it's like really the beginning. We are just starting with the internet. If you put it into a historical perspective, it's just the beginning. So I agree with you, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's just almost like addition that then we also have to accept all the other things that probably will happen, is that the institution's going to change, families going to change, community's going to change. So I don't think it's like it's always been like this, but this situation is still new. And in its newness, we have to understand that it will not be the same.
You're surprisingly optimistic here. I was kind of prepared for a lot of negativity, but I wasn't prepared for this. Okay, I can see that we have wishes to react from here and from there, so we'll continue. We'll start here and then we'll go back here. So, yes.
Just, I think you are right, not willing to be naive. And, but I think that there are a lot of, when you say that there were things we used to say alone in a dark room, and now we say it aloud in front of millions of people. I'm not sure. I think that on social media there are a lot of things which we do not say. I don't know if I am the only one, but there are a lot of things that you don't dare to say on social media, because you know that when you begin to show the beginning of a bad idea or an idea which nobody agree with, it will be very violent. And so I think that it's not our identity, actually, it's a public identity, and it's not the same public identity as it was before, but it's not ourselves. We are creating something which we can show on social media, I think.
Yes, okay. I saw a hand that wants to react, I guess, so please.
I'd like to respond to the earlier question. I'm not worried at all about those half of the world's population who don't have access to the internet, because 20 years ago, how many people did have access? 100 million, maybe 200 million? I think the speed with which the internet has spread has been, compared to history especially, has been insane. So I'm not too worried about that, actually. If we talk about solutions, I think one of the problems that we face is the fact that in the Philippines, for example, how do you gain access to the internet? You gain it through Facebook. So Facebook actually provides internet in this country and many other developing countries as well. And we need to come up with a way to provide the internet that doesn't rely on private companies. And one of the solutions, because you asked for solutions, I think is indeed state regulation. And we're more keen on this in Europe than we are in the US. So when I just heard 3 French speakers all say taxes and regulation is the way to go, I think in the US they'll think very differently about that, especially because a lot of these companies are not European. How many big European technology companies are there? They're mostly in the US. Why is that? And so I would say, indeed, let's divide these Facebook, let's divide Facebook from Instagram, from WhatsApp. Let's split these companies, and let's do so together. So we have a very different conception in the West than they do in China or in Russia of the internet, but in cooperation with US, Canada, and like-minded countries, I think that we could provide an example to the rest of the world. And so I think that's where the solution lies.
Thank you. Anyone wants to react from here?
Nice.
Yes.
How would it change Facebook, in your opinion? If you split Facebook from Instagram, from WhatsApp, how would it change Facebook?
I think a lot, and this was mentioned earlier as well, I think Facebook gains a lot of its influence from the fact that they have users which are spread out across this platform. And if you take away parts of that platform, I think they lose some of their power.
And even just to interact, it's called data network effect. This is where the biggest network gets the best benefits. That's how it's like everyone wants to get the biggest network. So you have to, if you control the network size, you actually control the power.
An algorithm used on a social media platform shouldn't be able to use, like for example, emotions in the algorithm, like this hate or love or other sorts of emotional reactions to information.
We react, of course, with emotion. So when the information is emotional, I know we will look at it, we will approve it, we will be in this. So I think it's a risk for democracy. Because when it's too sensational or too emotional, we don't think, we react. And we stop analysis. So I think it's a problem, and I think the media, in general, in France, are using this. When you have an attack, a terrorist attack, for example, we are going in emotion, and all the day long we are in emotion. And the day after, it's over. We don't speak about this. We are another thing. Mm-hmm. We are always in emotion.
Should we regulate it somehow?
I don't know how we can regulate it. because people are like this. We are tied by emotion. But I have the information about a study about the attacks of Boston. And we know that people who have watched television between 5 hours a day and 8 hours in the 10 days after the attacks, they have developed a syndrome of shock. It's just crazy. People who weren't at the event, but who watched TV, developed a syndrome of shock. So it's just crazy. It's the power of the images and the media. And I think it's a big risk for democracy.
Okay. So you mean that there can be a worse thing than the internet, which is television? So that's very reassuring. No, I just wanted to react to what you said. Maybe as a French, you would expect that I would agree with you that we should regulate, but I don't actually. And I don't understand on what ground you could ask companies to change these kind of things. If they want to put a thumb icon, how can you forbid them to do so? And I also wanted to react to what you said about fact-checking, because it's very interesting, because a few years ago many journalists thought that fact-checking would be the solution to fake news, that you could fact-check every fake news, but it doesn't work this way. Why doesn't it work this way? Because people who believe in a fake news will just say that you are manipulated, or that you can always question this kind of thing. And even if you use artificial intelligence, I think that you will have the same risk that people say that your artificial intelligence is manipulated. So I'm not sure if it will be efficient. But it's a good, it should be tried anyway.
And just a small fact, in France there is a money for developing new media, and especially it developed fact-checking technicals, and there is a big company which gave money to this foundation. It's Google.
Okay, I'll take a couple of more. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, there's a debate in France currently about the anonymous expression, and the debate is because Emmanuel Macron launched the idea of making it compulsory for online platforms to only accept people with their real names. The problem is really the freedom of expression. If you consider that some people don't dare to express themselves under their real name, and that it's a progress for them to be able to express themselves for many reasons. It can be political reasons, it can be identity reasons, it can be, there can be legitimate reasons for that. Then it's difficult to prevent it. It's very difficult to prevent it. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point is regarding what you can ask to Facebook. I think there is a misunderstanding with what you can ask to Facebook, because Facebook is not a public service. Facebook is a private company. And as a private company, it is driven it's not morally driven, it's economically and business driven. So there are strong limits about what you can ask them. Maybe the thing that you can activate is the risk for their image. And I think that's what happened with for instance, what you mentioned about Ireland and many things that they are trying to do is because they are assessing that there is a risk for their image. But beyond that, it's very difficult for them to accept something that is going to limit their revenues or to limit their profitability. And you won't be able to change their model because it's 100% advertising based.
But, as I see that hands are raising, I'll just kind of moderate the situation with a very short answer to this. I don't think you are saying that Mark Zuckerberg is evil. You're saying that we can't solve the problem.
I'm just saying
by
he's a business leader.
Yes.
I mean, he's just the head of a group. He employs people and he has shareholders, and his main aim is to make profit.
Okay.
Just to answer about health and the trolls, 2 questions. For the health, I'm quite divided because I think that we can also have many fears about technology, and now it's the devices and the time we spend with the screens and all that. Again, in 19th century, when electricity developed, there were very serious studies about the dangers of, for instance, electric telegraphs. And it was forbidden for women to work as telegraphists because it was not sure that this weak woman would be able to stand electricity. And so nowadays we have some kind of maybe fears, yes, maybe kind of part of phantasmatic fears, I don't know. And what I see, it's another part of the question, is that now the devices, they provide you with a means of controlling yourself with your use. It's quite crazy when you think about that. I mean that your iPad or your smartphone will tell you on a Sunday how much time you spent in the week. And so we are going aware of the risk of spending too much time, but if you spend very much more time, you will see how much more time you spend. And it's a question too of public education, so I come back to this question because I think that we have to be confident in the power of public mobilization. We know much more every day about the risks of the troll, and maybe you know astroturfing. Does it exist in English?
Yes.
And there are a lot of things which we didn't know before, and now we know it. And we have to ask our states to regulate the dangers that we discover. I mean that it's a question of image. Maybe there is a moment when it costs too much for a company not to protect people. I don't know if it's clear. The company will lose customers or will pay taxes, or not taxes, but
Fines.
yes, if they don't respect and some laws or some principles. So we have to claim to our state that they make it apply, that they make it true, but not establishing, not forbidding anonymous. I think it's quite dangerous because it's a kind of victory of the history to be able to write without signing. But now we don't think like that.
Yeah. Okay.
First, the question was, a long time ago, the question was, what was the one thing to do? And everyone said, yeah, some said, you said education, we said regulation. But now for me, it seems that this regulation talk has already become overwhelming. It's probably not possible to regulate everything. It's possible to regulate some things. And for me, it is just like one thing that might actually bring some kind of diversity into the space, but it probably doesn't solve the issues with architecture. Some of this will be actually very generational. I mean, people who are older, they like the world as it is. There will be new people, they will be probably different, and they like the world as it will be. And so that's the fact that we need to somehow separate these things. But there are like some natural changes that, I mean, you said, let's accept it. I say maybe I don't want to lose some things that I see that I already lose. And that's also like part of like how world goes. And I think with electricity, everything was the same. There were also people who lost the world that they liked, and then there were new people who liked the new world. And let's also try to see that, of course. But then I think there is like a third issue, is that probably the architecture of internet and this technology, this will also evolve. And that's interesting where this goes. And maybe this is like the last part of.
Yes, basically it is the last part. We have reached it, although it might go to 5G killing people, but I don't want to go there. But I suggest you to look at videos of 5G and look at the comments. It's very interesting. Anyway, but I would like to kind of make a break here and kind of change the shift or shift the gear or whatever. I don't drive a car. Look into the future and think what would be a nice future. What would be a nice democratic future with a nice democratic debate that you would like to live in, like to have in the future. And you can choose your own future, what you want, like 50 years, 100 years, a million years, whatever you want. But I would prefer you to have be a little bit closer. And what does that look like? Realistically, well, realistically utopian, okay. Yeah, you know what I mean. I mean, not entirely utopian, but like in a kind of half middle way there. So that, what would you like to have in the kind of 50 years, say 50 years time, and a nice democratic future? What would that look like for you?
I mean, basically, I think that the state where we are is much more advanced. If you were born pre-internet, you access to much more information. You can participate in any debate. You can do much more things than before. So I think of course, the topic tonight is very pessimistic and very negative because we speak about the drawbacks and we speak about the limits and we speak about the risks. But let's not lose the idea that internet is really a progress at the very beginning. I mean, at least it's my conviction, my opinion. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I think it's important to recall, to put things in this context. I think we started to talk about some solutions. I think a very promising solution is actually what you are doing tonight. It's curating, it's moderating, it's organizing the debate. And as far as I'm concerned, as a journalist, I think it's maybe a role that more journalists should take and be a kind of enablers of a better debate.
On social media and internet as well,
yeah,
I guess. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if I have a dream, it's that the incomes of these big companies would be better shared and better. I mean that they could be obligé. They could have to give the taxes, and that the taxes would serve for instance, in Europe or in France, to give money to people who produce real information. I mean that in our system in France, we pay as citizens, we pay taxes, and a part of our taxes are given to the press, to the diversity of media, to protect diversity of media. So if these internet companies could pay what they should pay with what they earn in France, for instance, we could have more money to continue to have a very good newspaper, because I think that in France we have very good journalists. We are always criticizing journalism, But since journalism exists, everybody thinks it was better before. So it doesn't change. And so we could protect the diversity of public debate this way, for instance.
Mm-hmm. So it's similar in Estonia. We have this tax on gambling, and that those funds are directly directed to cultural projects and other projects like that. So we have a social media tax that is directed into journalism, basically. Okay.
If I have a dream, for me, it's that everybody is responsible of the truth. You know, we are all responsible by the information and the information we share. So we must think before sharing something, before publishing something. And already I have the feeling that it's not the truth in the information. It's before internet. We have studies, you know, and we begin with the facts, and after we are acting. And now we have doctrine, and the communicators are checking the facts that they are interested in the most information in the world. So they take the information they are interested in only, and we are not citizens.
But I believe there is some kind of promise in new technologies like tokenization and blockchain. Essentially, I think that blockchain, which in its nature tries to generate or make trust happen through algorithm, I believe this can somehow change how we produce information. And for example, we could just have this kind of mental game. Estonia has a public broadcasting, which we're actually putting a lot of money in every year. There are a lot of journalists, and this is, I think, really, really very important thing to have. But let's just imagine that we would use that money somehow differently. Let's think there would be a platform to do that, and the government would just issue that money as tokens. And people could earn these tokens when they produce news. Any people, any person. But of course there would be rules. It has to be validated by like some super nodes, by some people who have already validated something. There's this kind of architecture. And then suddenly it may happen that people are financially interested in generating some kind of information, and this architecture it's actually up to the government how they change this architecture, how they put incentives into it, how you earn these tokens. And then suddenly you might have this kind of ecological and economical system that makes everyone do something. And I think this would be more in line with the fragmentation of the internet and all these kind of things. But of course, this is just a mental exercise. I would not say that let's get rid of the public broadcasting, because it's really good that we have it. But just to think about it, I think there is a possibility that smart contracts, earning tokens, creating different blockchains can actually somehow generate a totally new technology, and also this new technological reality that will produce different incentives for companies and for people.
As I know there are journalists in the audience, then I hope the click media doesn't work, and there won't be a headline tomorrow that the public broadcast should be closed.
Oh, no.
We are in the same democracy. Yeah, I hope at least. You had dreamed, you have shared your dreams a little bit. You can also think about your dreams. What do you think a good democracy in the future could look like? But as a kind of last round for you, I would like to ask, I'd actually like to put this into the individual's perspective right now. There are a lot of people here listening, thinking about this, obviously thinking that this is an important issue. What should they do? Like, they go home from here, what's the next step for them? how will they save democracy, at least a little bit, and a little bit of democratic debate?
I think I would like to connect what was said in the audience and somehow say that there is also clarity in knowing that it doesn't work. I mean, let's stop pretending that some things work through education or they work for better moderation in a media company, or Facebook would suddenly really turn itself into a different side. I think for me it was liberating at some point. I realized, no, let's not deceive myself with these kind of illusions. And that's also about accepting it in a way. That, okay, here we are, but now we can go further. Let's not try to do something which we now know. But that's my very personal thing.
Yes, thank you.
Actually, I talked about education, but I would go one step further, and I would say, educate yourself about being a good educator, and especially if you have kids or when you have kids, how will I teach them about all these new things? And you have to totally reinvent you as a parent, and it's really exciting.
Thank you.
For myself, I think that we don't know a better regime than democracy. There's no better regime than this. And for me, the two keys of democracy is the truth in information. So we must defend the truth. And also contradiction, because there's no debate, there's no democracy without contradiction. So we must open our minds to others and others' opinion.
And just a slight comment here. If you want to open your mind to opinions that you don't see usually, you can check out Facebook groups with names that you hate. And then you find information you have not heard before. So thank you.
My advice, if I can give one, is to vote, because we have this problem in France. So many people who don't go to the day of the election and don't vote, and so I think that it's always a thing really important. It has not much to do with internet, social media, but for democracy, as you say, we didn't invent anything better, so vote.
Actually, in Estonian context, there was an article yesterday or a couple of days ago about all of the parties that we have and their promises in the context of internet. So you can look at that and see if they match with what you think should be done, and if they don't, then don't vote for them. It's kind of obvious. But now it's time for all of the last questions. We have an entire 13 minutes for all questions and comments. And you can go both comments and questions here. We're a very free forum here. So first hand, second hand, yes. Yes, you can.
To be from, if you want regulation, actually have to come from the governments, from EU type of places that they want to protect or make clear what is what. So I don't think it will come as voters' demand that let's make more public space. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, the problem is that we need some kind of enlightened committees or whatever,
Yes.
but at the same time it doesn't favor, this age and time doesn't really favor these kind of things. And I'm not the one who actually thinks that we should regulate everything, and it's just about this size of the companies.
Yeah. Okay, any other possibilities? Something else but the benevolent AI doing it for us?
Yes, it's interesting the way you ask the question, but imagine that one day you publish something really racist or on Facebook, and immediately you get a message which tells you that this number of law will apply, this law, I don't know, the X law, will apply to your text.
With Adobe At the P we have this.
Yes, we had this. Yes, and maybe in this way you realize that it's public, no?
It's like
Big Brother.
how I mean, you would probably, this effect that it would create would be that you would be really censored by yourself because you don't know what to say, what not to say. It's like I don't know.
I mean, there is like a place where it works very well in YouTube. I don't know if you've tried to upload copyrighted material on YouTube.
I did.
Yeah, then YouTube tells you that this is copyrighted and
Yes.
what happens now. And first you're scared, like, you know, is the police going to knock on my door next? But they said, no, this is not going to happen, that we're going to take a little bit of, we'll put a little bit of advertising on it, and when the copyright owner asks us, we will take it off. So it's possible to some extent at least.
YouTube made it possible, it's true.
So, any other hands? I saw, one.
I think
It starts to fight back. It may not be you who wins, it's also true. So it's a good point to consider. Maybe we're past that point that we can do that, I don't know.
Yeah, 2.7 billion now.
2.7, yeah.
Yes, from today. Yeah, you want to comment? Yes, I understand.
I wanted to add a tiny thing there.
Yes.
About the image thing. I think it was today or yesterday when it came out that Facebook basically paid 13-year-olds to give them access to their private phone usage data. And like if you can pull that off as a company, which is illegal on several levels, how much power do we still have? But that was just like the subtext of that. So.
Yeah, but this American example is very good in the sense that one of the richest people in the history of mankind, Rockefeller, used to own a very big company, Standard Oil, was the name of the company. And it was very influential and did a lot of things illegally. Basically bought up politicians and controlled half of the country. And then some politicians had some balls and fought against it and won. That's in a way it's as simple as that. But it also depends on voting. This specific politician was voted to become the president of the United States with the promise of breaking up this company. So maybe we should vote for politicians who promise to break up Facebook. I don't know which.
You're going to vote in US? Or?
Yes, then we will have to vote in the US as well.
I think your point is very interesting because it's also one of the main arguments for Mark Zuckerberg. He says Facebook consumers basically they are happy not to pay for the service, and they thanks to our model, advertising model, they don't have to pay for our service. And the problem is that if you introduce regulation towards Facebook, then the risk is that you're going to not only to alienate Facebook, but also to alienate Facebook users.
But with this, I think we have reached basically the end. If there is something that you would really, really like to add, then now is your moment to do this. As I can see, there is nothing you really want to add. If there's something you really like to add or ask, then some of the speakers probably will stay here for a while, but not very long. And you also have some time to look around in the museum, not very long either, but a little bit. But also take the refreshments and the snacks that are somewhere. But I think it's time to thank some people. Of course, the French Institute for organizing. Also the speakers, of course. Also Vabamu, who has actually given these rooms for free. And by the way, if you want to, you can leave a small donation for them as well, as they have provided this room for us. Also the French Embassy for the support. And to all you for coming here, for caring about democracy and debate, and participating in a debate as well. And I'm not sure if you will leave this place today with more hope or less, but I hope that you will leave with an better understanding of what you can do in order to be more hopeful, at least with some ideas. So thank you everybody, and have a nice evening today.